Welcome to NFL Daily, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook, where we don't know if we did or didn't raw dog on the flight. Over here, I am Gregg Rosenthal at the Greenwood Sports Pub here in London. And yes, it's a Chicago Bears bar in the middle of London. And Nat asked me a question before the show. I'm here with Nat Coombs and Ollie Connolly, two of my favorite voices over in the UK, talking American football, as you guys would call it. And you asked me a question I didn't know the answer to, Nat.
We've got to put the context of the raw dog reference within the first 5 seconds of the show. We've got to give that context. So, as Ollie, as you back me up here, pretty standard question.
Yeah.
Greg, how was the flight? Did you raw dog on the flight?
I mean, I know what raw dog means, but not in the context of a flight. What does that mean?
Not having?
Well, I know what it means, but in the context of a flight, what? Not having a drink or something else to help you along the way?
That's a part of it. Yeah, it's a kind of extreme. There's no in-flight movies. There's no nothing. You're just staring, meditating. You're allowed to go to the bathroom. I'm not sure.
I'm not quite sure. I think you're supposed to just sit in a zen-like state for as long as the flight. You can't move. You can't talk. You can't do anything.
Which is actually how I prepared for this show. Just to be clear.
No, I did not raw dog. I did not have any drinks, but I did crank through a decent amount of Love is Blind season 7 or whatever we're on. Yeah, like three episodes. But did some prep for this show because I knew I had to keep up with you guys. Nat Coombs, of course, is the announcer on Talk Sport Radio. He's got his own podcast, the Nat Coombs podcast. You got to check it out. And Ollie Connolly is getting it done on the Read Optional podcast. He's finally gotten rid of worrying about soccer, and he's focused on the most important football. And you're doing that podcast twice a week with John Ledyard, and it is absolutely great. If we can do one thing here, it's getting people to check out the Nat Coombs podcast and sign up for the Read Optional.
Love this plug Central Ledyard.
Yeah.
I want to put in context for all your American listeners, Ollie and I. So Ollie is one of the most prominent X's and O's guys in the game. I mean, I'd say globally, but definitely in the UK. He's like an MIT professor. I'm like the fourth grade high school teacher that comes into school, takes roll call, and then puts on a movie for 45 minutes for the rest of class.
Not true. But we will be cranking through all the games. And yes, Nat, you do have a way with presenting. And I met Nat and Will Gavin, who's going to be on the show on Sunday with me and Ollie. I think it was about 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Covering a Rams-Giants game. Back, NFL media actually paid for me to come out and write about the game, which is hard to imagine them doing now. And that was, Case Keenum's last start as an LA Ram. And I remember asking the question to Jeff Fisher, would he be benching them after the game? And he said no, and then 2 days later he did. And the Jared Goff era started in Los Angeles. We will get to every game. We're basically doing the same preview show that we do each and every week. We'll get to the game at Tottenham in a little bit, but we go through the games in reverse order of the point spread. So the closest point spreads first. So we will start with one of my favorite topics these days, the New York Jets, the Buffalo Bills going to New York, 2.5-point underdogs. Ollie, you're one of the foremost Nathaniel Hackett defenders in the media.
Don't put that on me.
Explain why.
I'm not a defender. I would like the criticism to be accurate. I think there's a sense out there, and I read this everywhere, and I've seen this on TV, and people I really respect saying that the Jets run a prehistoric offense or they're running Aaron Rodgers' offense from 10 years ago, and it's just factually inaccurate. They have tried to do plenty of things. They've run basically the core elements of the Matt LaFleur offense. When you just go through number by number of what they're running, it is identical to what they did in the second MVP season together in Green Bay. The only one that's slightly different is the motion rate. Well, if the guy hates motion, maybe you don't want to run it at such a high level, but it's a normal-ish level and is higher than like the Commanders, who are clubbing everyone over the head in the league right now. So I'm not critical of like the architecture of the offense. I think Nathaniel Hackett's done a terrible job. I think that the mechanics and the details of the offense are really poor. He's always been a bad play caller, but the actual design of the offense is pretty standard and fine. They run a lot of the stuff everyone else runs.
It's quite a big drawback if you're an offensive coordinator or a bad play caller.
Yeah.
Right? That's
right. Like, so they are running a lot of the cool stuff that other people run. Before we started, I got to look at your computer, and you're out there diagramming plays by yourself, like writing it all down of like that they're doing some of the same stuff that McVay and LaFleur does. It just doesn't look as good when it's maybe not sequenced as well, or if Aaron Rodgers, maybe that's not the right offense for him, because when it's worked this year, and I think Aaron Rodgers has thrown the ball quite well, like when he's just sitting there and kind of ripping the ball, he's still a very talented thrower of the ball. Overall, like if you add it all up, I would say he's still an above average starting quarterback, certainly, and I was worried about him coming off the Achilles and everything. It just doesn't all like work together very well, and he clearly could have defended his guy, Robert Saleh, who he says he has a great relationship with. But if you had a great relationship with him, you could have told your owner during that conversation like how much you believe in him. And I have to believe that did not happen.
When you think about quarterbacks and decline, I always remember the old Hemingway line, how did he go broke gradually then suddenly, right?
Right.
And that doesn't appear to be happening with Rodgers. To your point, there are flashes, moments, passages of a game where you think, oh yeah, he's going to have a season for the ages. The Patriots game springs to mind, and I know it's the Patriots, but you think, okay, this is all rolling. He's zipping it, he's moving, it's working. And then you see the dysfunction that we saw on Sunday. The whole Salah situation, I heard you guys cover it brilliantly on your show earlier this week. My favorite part of all of that was the Woody Johnson line that he talked to Aaron Rodgers about it, and Salah didn't come up in conversation. Like, we believe that.
I mean, but even if you do, I kind of believe it, but even that is, like, Aaron Rodgers is saying on the McAfee show, like, people think I have a lot more power than I actually do. Like, he's a smart guy. Like, there's such a thing as soft power. Like,
sure.
he knows that not bringing up Robert Saleh, not having a full-throated defense, and then in the very same interview saying, like, I think our new coach, Jeff Ulbrich, is going to bring accountability, you know, in a way that we need in the building, and that we need accountability all throughout the roster. Like, that's enough.
Yeah, I may be naive on this, but I really don't believe he had anything to do with it. I just don't think that's the way he operates. I think he's a pretty passive-aggressive guy, and it would come in drips and drabs, and him not mentioning it on a phone call is why you would get to the decision like he's good with it, rather than him being the kind of person who would walk into an office, pick up the phone himself, and say, hey, it's time to move on.
But isn't the point Gregg's making that the silence speaks volumes, and that if Aaron Rodgers is telling Woody Johnson, we need him, he's got to stay, then Salah doesn't go, does he?
No, I think when you just run through what's wrong with them this season, the number one thing is the offensive line has been terrible, right? It's been brutal. They can't run the ball. They can't protect. They can't pick anything up in the blitz game. Most of that, to me, falls on the general manager, Joe Douglas. Then you've got the issues with the offense that I'm sure you've detailed a million times between both Rodgers and Hackett and the entire staff. And then you get to the bottom rung, and it's Robert Saleh and his defense and the culture and leadership of the team, at least in my opinion. Well, only one of those you can really change. Changing the GM midstream changes nothing for your locker room. Rodgers is not going to get benched. He's not going to allow Nathaniel Hackett to be fired. We've already heard that he's not going to be out of the building. So the only thing they could pull to try and change things midstream would be to let Saleh go.
I mean, we've seen it with this ownership group before, that you get angry and you make a change, not for change's sake, but just because, like, I need to do something. And unfortunately for Robert Saleh, you could look at Ulbrich and kind of think, like, they can still run this same defense, and maybe it'll just be a little different vibes, and the vibes will help, or it just looks like we're doing something. When you look at this matchup, though, like, defensively, the Jets going up against this Bills offense, which I also don't know exactly what to think about right now. Like, how do you think the Jets defensively match up against Josh Allen coming off of this 9 for 30 game?
Yeah, I think they match up pretty well. I think the concern would be how well can the Bills run the ball. The Jets are just not built in any way to try and stop the run. The Bills have played really heavy this season, bunch of heavy personnel, bunch of extra linemen set, so that would be the concern. Then you get into favorable down and distance. The Bills have been a team that struggled to convert on third downs this year, so that's what they'll be looking at, is how well can they move the ball on early downs. Can they get easy completions on first down? Can they move the ball that way? It's just a weird offense in the sense that those first 3 weeks, every single thing they did felt like it was clicking and moving, and it was all very much about play design and movement and Joe Brady and Josh Allen picking the right spots. Now, the next 2 weeks, you see when it becomes a game of talent and just like, let's play some matchup ball. That's where I think some of the preseason concerns about the receiver room have been exposed.
Yeah, James Cook missed practice on Wednesday. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot that as we're taping this, we'll find out more. Nate Hackett might be losing play calling by the time people hear this, which would be interesting on the other side. I think they're going to be okay. You have a great offensive line on balance, and you have Josh Allen. I think they have a good enough coaching staff that they can make the rest of it work. They shouldn't miss Khalil Shakir as much as they did last week, but he's probably the guy that Josh Allen trusts the most. When you look at these two teams, I mean, it's the Bills coming off of a pretty rough stretch too, desperately needing to win. It's kind of similar to me to the Bengals-Ravens matchup last week, where the future of this division is going to feel a lot differently, based on how this game goes. The Bengals won that game. I mean, the Ravens won that game last week, and now they're 2 games clear of the division. If the Bills win this game on the road, the Jets are in a world at 2-4.
And that's the crazy thing about the timing of this decision, right? Like this, conceivably, they go into this sat in a different alternate reality, and Salah's still there, and they go in and win this, and they're in. To your point, they're in relative control, or at least they've got the momentum. They've got they are on the front foot divisionally, so the timing feels incredibly odd. I have a super quick question.
Yes.
For you both on the Jets ground game.
Please feel comfortable to jump in and be the host here. Yeah, just go for it.
It's the anchor in me. Yeah. With the ground game, why is the Jets ground game so anemic?
How long do we have?
20 seconds.
The offensive line has been really poor, obviously. They're trying to do an awful lot of things. You go and watch the game on Sunday. 19 of their first 22 plays are in a congested, tight formation. They're doing the things Matt LaFleur did when Rodgers was really cooking there. The run game was really good when Rodgers was winning those MVPs. And they just can't block anyone. They are using tight ends who just are not rosterable players. It sounds brutal, but it's just the reality. And they're doing Mike McDaniel type wind back blocks and really cool creative things that just have no hope of working with the talent they have. And they would just at this point be better off doing the thing they're being accused of, which is, yes, go and run the Aaron Rodgers offense. That is what they've done most of the season, which is burn their first 25 plays trying to run the offense that Matt LaFleur had back in Green Bay. It doesn't work. They hit their head against the wall. They pivot midstream and say, this isn't working. Let's go and run the stuff that Aaron's comfortable with. He picks at the line of scrimmage. They just drive down the field. That's actually where they've looked at their best, at least for me.
Yeah, I think it's just they give up so much penetration in the running game. The average yards before contact, which, there can be some wonkiness in the stats, but it's all backed up when you watch it. There's no room for Breece Hall to run. I've always thought Breece Hall is a little bit overrated as a back because I don't know how much that he creates on his own. He's a very explosive player, but I think if you're in a situation like this where you're not going to get the run blocking, you're going to have a lot of negative plays. They've been more successful when they run it with Braylon Allen because he'll get what's blocked and maybe a yard forward. He'll fall forward. He's a bigger guy, but there's no cohesion. I think that was a really great point by Ollie on the running backs and the tight ends, because now when I just think in my head through the plays that have failed, their offensive line has been up and down. Tyron Smith has looked older, which makes sense. He is older. He just had that year last year where everyone was like, wow, Tyron Smith is back, but it's a lot to ask him to be so good. And on the interior, they've kind of been matchup dependent. When you play a good front, they haven't been good, and this is a good front for the most part for Buffalo. I love Buffalo in this game, by the way. A little tease maybe for my show later this week with Neil Reynolds, where we pick the games against the spread. I just think it's a big game for them. I'm really excited to see this. My last quick thing on this, and we can't go this long in each game, but this is the most fascinating game of the week for me, is the Josh Allen conversation from last week. Thinking about this game just from a practical lens, I am concerned that Josh Allen is potentially coming off of a concussion that was not reported. It was crazy to see him come back in that game after what you saw visually and the smelling salts, and there was also a big hit he took the week before, and I just think it's okay to have some concern here for him as a human and for how that's going to translate to how he's playing on the field, because he was 1 for 9 after that massive hit.
I mean, his worst performance statistically ever, right, in his entire career off the back.
Right, but all the incompletions that happened before that, he was playing up and down, but the football was getting to his receivers' hands for the most part, and it's crazy. I think the NFL should be taking a little more heat than they did for that entire process, him and Jaquan Brisker.
I just cannot understand why it has not been a way bigger storyline. That it seems pretty evident and pretty obvious, not only from the fact that we see the video of the head hitting the ground, not only that we see the smelling salt and him looking confused pre-smelling salts and waking up a little bit post-smelling salts, as you would expect, but you mentioned the accuracy. when he's throwing after the hit, it does look like he's trying to pick between the multiple people he's seeing down the field and hoping one of them is the correct guy. So, yeah, it should be, to me, a way bigger storyline. It's something I'd be concerned about.
And I guess particularly, when you think about the Tua concussion and his back, it was his back. And
oh, yeah, all you Dolphins fans are up in arms about this. Like, how come they're not treating him the same as the Tua thing? It's like, you got a fair point. All right, let's go to Titans hosting the Colts this week. See, this is where we can save some time. 2.5 points. Sure. They're favored. They're coming off the bye week. It does look like it's going to be Will Levis. There's no QB controversy in Tennessee. He is fully practicing, so it seems like he is going to be back out there. Again, this is a little bit of a mystery box because they're not announcing that Levis is officially the starter, but they said if he's healthy, he's going to start, and he did fully practice on Wednesday. We don't know for sure if Anthony Richardson is starting in this game or if it's Joe Flacco. Again, they said if Richardson is fully healthy, he's going to start. I tend to think it's probably going to be Richardson. Jeffrey Simmons is probably back for this game. Kwity Paye and Kenny Moore are probably back for this game, which is crucial because last week the Colts made the Jaguars look so good on offense, and the Colts are 32nd in the league, dead last in yards per drive allowed. So Gus Bradley has this thing where it's like, yeah, we're going to bend and won't break, and we'll keep things in front of you. And I'm watching the game, and they don't keep things in front of them, and
it's bending and breaking simultaneously.
Right, and they've had a lot of injuries up front, and it's just like an average talent with probably a below-average scheme and a lot of injuries, and so that's rough. So it could be a bit of a get-right game for the Titans and their running game and Will Levis.
The Will Levis comeback starts right here. I feel, fellas, partially responsible for Will Levis because week 1 of the season, we're doing our live radio show on TalkSport, and Ollie Thornton, who, of course, you both know, Ollie Thornton, who is a long-standing
everyone in
character.
The UK American football like society is either Ollie or Will. Ollie or Will.
That's
yes.
effectively. He's one of the 11
Like,
Ollies.
no offense to Ollie Wilson, though, but we got the number 1 Ollie here. Like, we drafted him.
There's Ollie Wilson as well.
Yeah.
This is Ollie Thornton.
There's a lot of
Propo, who is long-standing part of the NFL community over here. I messaged him maybe about 25, 30 minutes into the season. This is now a legendary, something that will be brought up against me for years to come. I think Will Levis is legit, was the message I sent. So I personally feel responsible for the decline of Will Levis. On the Colts, one of the main narratives, I think, in the last couple of weeks has been, do they have a better chance of making the playoffs with Joe Flacco as opposed to Anthony Richardson? I don't think that matters, right? I mean, is there any point in squeaking into the playoffs and probably going out first round with a vet like Flacco when you got to work out if this is your quarterback of the future, your franchise? I mean, I don't know why that question's being thrown out, why that's even being considered as a strategy.
Well, I think, look, everyone wants to win. It's really high pressure. These guys got mortgages to pay. They got jobs and job ladders they want to climb up. If you have the best chance to win with Joe Flacco, Anthony Richardson has barely played any football. He didn't play much football in high school. He barely played in college. He's had very few starts in the NFL because of injuries. If there's a way you can kind of use a bit of chicanery by saying hey, the injury's not totally healed, take another couple of weeks, particularly in this matchup, because the main thing for the Titans is they can stop the run really effectively. They actually don't have a really dominant pass rush by any stretch, even though they're really high up in all the advanced metrics defensively. Their pressure rate is really low. It's concentrated in essentially one player for the most part. Arden Key gets some, but it's mostly Harold Landry. They're cycling through 7th-round picks and undrafted free agents who are doing absolutely nothing for them in the pass rush. So if you're facing a team struggles to get off the ball and has the juice to stop the pass, why would you not put the guy in who's way more methodical and can dime it down the field, as opposed to bringing Richardson back where it's way more boom or bust, you're more run game concentrated. It's actually matchup-wise would make more sense to me to just roll with Flacco anyway.
That does make sense, and yet you just have, because of the lack of starts Richardson has had, this is the year that you have to get him those starts.
You got to get him,
and
you got to know
the
what you got.
chances of making the playoffs with Joe Flacco is, in theory, incrementally better. I don't know if that would actually play out, and even then, I don't think it's especially high if this defense doesn't get any better. Since we last taped, they announced Michael Pittman is going to miss multiple weeks. Josh Downs was out of practice. He finished that game, so I would expect that he's playing. My fantasy pickup of Josh Downs is feeling better every week. Josh Downs can play, although all those guys are probably a little happier when Flacco's back. I mean, I watched that Flacco game too, and it was very similar to last year with the Browns, where you can watch the Joe Flacco game and look at the box score afterwards and be like, man, through through big chunks of Joe Flacco games, he's making some crazy decisions and missing some throws too. It's not like it's all beautiful with Joe Flacco, but his great throws are great, and he's not afraid, and he's fun to watch.
He plays not afraid is the point. It's almost to the point of boredom with him. He just like gets the ball out, and he looks like he's like dulled by the fact that he's completing throws. It's just like, okay, this is what I'm asked to do. Obviously with Richardson, you get the upside. They got to find out what they have, but they got issues up front with the offensive line. He is not a guy who's figuring out the protections and all the mechanics and that stuff. They got a Ryan Kelly injury. They got injury at right tackle. They got to figure out if that's a go this week. I think it's difficult to drop someone in, and when you rip Ryan Kelly out the lineup, and they do a lot of different things in the protection world, you take him out, and you've got to have Richardson do that stuff, or a backup come in and do that stuff. That now you're in a concern when you're facing a team who you should really be able to attack through the
Yeah, it's a bit of a relevance bowl here, because if Titans lose at home to the Colts, I mean, people have probably written them off already, but that would be the time to do it at 1-5. You're in a very tough spot. Then again, if the Colts get to 2-4. They are also in a tough spot. So a big game for these two teams in the AFC South. All right, it is time for the sneaky good game of the week presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm going Chargers Broncos as the sneaky good game of the week just because these two teams, I just don't know what to think about either of these teams. The Chargers are favored by 3 on the road in Denver, which is an amazing amount of disrespect from Vegas for the Broncos after the last couple of weeks. I mean, this is a 3-2 team with a legitimately good defense who are playing a kamikaze-like style of game. They are blitzing at a 54% rate on first down, which is just wild. And they're creating like the third highest pressure rate, or they're playing against a team rather who's giving up the third highest pressure rate in the Chargers. Yeah, which is surprising. You thought their offensive line was going to be great, and they're a strange team because Herbert is getting rid of the ball pretty quickly, but on the plays that he isn't, it's like he's holding it on a long time and he's getting hit quite a bit. Joe Alt at right tackle and Rashawn Slater were back at practice for this game. They're going up against a great cornerback duo. I could put Riley Moss in a sentence with great right now. He's playing well, at least. He's playing well enough because he's supported by the pressure. How do you see it when the Chargers have the ball, Ollie, against this defense, which has been pretty fun to watch?
They've been so good. Zach Allen has been one of the best players in the NFL, and he's still one of the underrated players. I mean, he's been dominant inside. What's so fun about watching them is how well they just play as a collective, as a unit. They all perform their roles like to an unbelievable degree. Everything is built as a group rather than having different. You mentioned the blitz packages. It's not built in a way to feature one person or to try and tilt the protection in one way. It's a really layered design where everyone has to be like at the absolute apex of their powers, down in, down out. So the fact it's humming so well when there's so many moving pieces, everyone has to perform. Those 3 interior guys have been unbelievable. I think it's going to be a difficult one. I just don't think that the Chargers right now have enough like easy get-out escape valves. So when the pressure is arriving, unless it's Lab McConkey, who's been really, really impressive, probably should have way higher production than he actually has. And we get McConkey on Moss, I think at some point it's going to break the internet. I think we'll get that at some point.
Yes, Riley Moss has been breaking barriers. I'm genuinely surprised it's not a bigger story that a white cornerback is out here making like. I mean, he mossed a guy on an interception last week. That was a fantastic play. All the metrics are fantastic for him. He's certainly supported by the coverage is rolled to his side. But, yeah, McConkey's playing well. I thought their last game before the bye was certainly the game where you saw the most McConkey from college come out, and so that's exciting to see. On the other side, Bo Nix has averaged 2.2 yards per attempt when under pressure this year, which is just like a wild stat. Like, as much as they're building him up as he's a great leader and he's a winner, the best news for him, not just the defense playing great, but Javonte Williams has played well the last couple of weeks. They have gotten a pretty traditional running game going 2 weeks in a row, and I think that's the way you got to attack the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the Chargers banged up O-line, and Joe Alt, if he's back, that's a massive plus, but the Broncos O-line's been banged up as well, so you got to put that in context a little bit. Bo Nix fascinates me because it's that draft, and I'm definitely going to get into Michael Penix a bit later on. I'm just going to trail that right now. That draft, and it seemed to be a really divisive pick. Half roughly, well, it's a reach, they're panicking, they just need someone, they've got anyone. Other half, Peyton knows what he's doing. He knows his guy. He's got his guy. So when you pilot that now into the role that they're on, they're starting to get a bit of momentum. The argument that they two of them had on the sidelines last week, which was blown out of proportion ridiculously. But what that told me was that Nick's not afraid to step up. Peyton clearly likes what he sees there. Nick's is in fairly safe hands. I think out of all of that class, or amongst that class, pre-season, pre-draft, Bo Nick's trajectory where it is now, I think he's landed pretty well.
No, I think you're taking the cheese here. I'm not buying it. Like these two teams in this division, like they're gonna be built up a little bit by their schedules all year. And like every week, they're just like, oh, that's a winnable game for the Broncos. It's partly schedule related. They're doing what they can. He's actually been pretty effective when he chooses to run Bo Nix.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give him too much credit.
I'm not buying the Bo Nix stuff. I even go back. There's been some level of progression, but to me, it's mostly been them like ripping out core elements of their offense to let him do things that are really, really basic and easy for him to do. They still have operational issues. They still struggle getting plays out of the huddle. They still struggle with the play clock. He can't really drive anything down the field unless it's moving and creating in some way. And this happened with Sean Payton. It's happened with him before. It happens at times in New Orleans. It happened with Russell Wilson, where the offense only looks really functional when it's the 2-minute drill or someone's trying to like create something out of the structure of the offense. It just still feels baked in 2013 to me, and I'll give him some credit. He has over the past 3 weeks like thrown in new things that Nick's ran in college. I think he realized like the guy was staring in the headlights in the first couple of weeks and just throwing up a bunch of panic balls. But he just screams to me of a guy who, unless they're running all the screens, they ran like 50 to open the week last week. Unless you're really putting him in that shell, he's going to give the defense opportunities every single week.
You're both selling Bo Nix.
No, I am selling Bo Nix, at least like right now. I'm not counting out like Sean Payton can build him up over a course of time, but he's still a rookie quarterback. And this is a tough matchup. Denver's getting all the love on defense, but Jesse Minter and this Chargers team, I'm not exactly sure what they're doing, but it's been very sound. It's fundamental. They're getting my guy Christian Fulton playing at a high level at cornerback. I think like overall, like they are number 2 in the league right now in DVOA. And again, that's very much I think about their schedule. They've had a very beneficial schedule for opposing offense, for their defense. But I think they could lock it down. This is like a 10-9 game, which sounds about right. All right,
I can't wait.
Chargers win. Steelers favored by 3, going to Vegas. This is the Iron Eagle Charles Davis game, which means like there's not a lot going on CBS on Sunday or in the AFC in general. Since we last taped, they announced Christian Wilkins is potentially out for the season, but he's definitely on IR. And he's definitely out for a while. He hadn't made quite the impact that I expected this year, maybe because there's been other injuries there on the defensive line. Max Crosby is now in the maintenance portion of his season where he's like only playing on Sundays but not practicing throughout the course of the week. Alex Highsmith is out for this game for Pittsburgh. Herbig is out for this game for Pittsburgh. Cordarrelle Patterson is out. They might get Jalen Warren back. I do feel like there's just so many injuries that I got to just bring that up at the beginning because that makes such an impact. I'm not sure what to think about this, like what's left of this Steelers team, but this Vegas defense, which was supposed to kind of be their calling card, has been just they went with a defensive coach hoping there would be carry over there, and it's just been and now they don't have Christian Wilkins for a while. Your guy from Miami.
My guy, I got it when he left there. I mean, the O'Connell getting the starting job, of course, and that whole battle I think has been fascinating. Particularly when you mentioned Antonio Pierce, one of the first things he did.
Thank you for covering me there as a good broadcaster. I should have mentioned that we have a new starting quarterback here for the Las Vegas Raiders. But does it really matter?
Well, that's the question, I guess. And when Pierce got the gig, as the interim gig, after the legendary cigars in the locker room once McDaniels, one of my favorite, I think, moments in the history of the NFL, when players are celebrating with a cigar and McDaniels is gone. That was one of his first calls, was to make O'Connell the start. So he obviously likes him. It was interesting that Minshew got the start at the start of the season. Is it going to tangibly, markedly uplift him? I think there's a lot of talk of the pick 6 that Minshew threw and his confidence went, and he's obviously such a confidence player. Again, are they looking at a younger quarterback that they think they might be able to build something around? Is that the upside here for the rest of the season for them? Then maybe
I don't think
he is not your upside. He's not even that young of a quarterback.
No,
like he was so old
they
when he
are on full-on locker room meltdown watch for me. And I love Antonio Pierce. I love the vibes. I think that was really fun the back end of last season. But you got the Devontae Adams situation. You got
He's
Crosby
still a Raider,
injury,
by the way. That's the
still a
official
Raider
line.
for now. You're going to AOC, and that is going to be a mess. Within 3 weeks, they'll all be like, why did we do that? They'll go back to the other guy.
Although
They'll
that's
bench him
Devontae's
again.
guy. For a second, I was like, is this like a little bit of a, hey, you want to come back like when you get healthy, Devontae? Because he had pretty good numbers with AOC
Maybe that's why
last
they made
year.
the
He has good numbers with everyone. He's Devontae Adams. He could play with me and Nat, and he would do a pretty good job.
You've been on the corner that Devontae Adams on film does not look
No.
like he's declining much. I mean, maybe he's down a little bit from
Yeah.
his super peak, but that and yeah, you can kind of see it in his big last game that he played.
Yeah,
Like,
I would
he's
say
playing
like
great.
5-10% max. And you take 5-10% away from Devontae Adams, you go from the best receiver in the league to one of the best receivers in the league.
Sure.
It doesn't make that much of a difference. So, yeah, I know there's a money situation, but if you are a team out there, Bills, Chiefs, Jets, whoever looking for some kind of help, to me it would be a no-brainer. It's not one of these stark declines and you're overpaying for someone from 2 seasons ago. He's still a major difference maker.
And Belichick is on Underdog talking with Matt Patricia and Lombardi, and it's like you can't give up a second. That's it's too big a price, and that does seem to be the consensus. And I'm thinking, what are we talking about? First of all, he gave up a 2 for Mo Sanu.
Yeah.
We've seen him once you actually get on draft day, people are throwing out 2s just to go up 8 spots in the second round.
Yeah.
But then you get into the season and they get so locked in, and people say, well, it's the contract. This year, he's actually quite affordable, so as long as you can fit him in, and not every team can seamlessly, but basically every team can, and even the teams like the Saints could figure it out by starting to renegotiate elsewhere. He's not that expensive this year, and I don't know what his situation in terms of wanting guaranteed money, but his next 2 years are exactly where you would expect them to be.
Yeah.
They're not a crazy amount. So on that front, I don't get it, but Pierce actually said if he's healthy, we expect him to play again for the Raiders. We'll see if that happens. Just very quickly, the O'Connell versus Minshew thing. O'Connell takes a lot of chances, actually. They're kind of similar-ish quarterbacks to me, except O'Connell, he doesn't have a big arm, but I think he'll maybe even go deeper down the field. I don't know what the difference
I think you're looking for some kind of difference.
Yeah.
And I think Antonio Pierce is to it. They are pretty much the same profile of player, slightly different body type, but when you just kind of look through their body of work and what they actually do, they're pretty much the same player. Maybe one takes slightly more gambles than the other, but it's not like a marked difference.
No, and so I think they're going to struggle against the Steelers defense, which is not the same defense without this defensive line and edge rushers. And so
they can't run it either, right? They're the 30th with the Raiders, that is. They can't run the balls, so
right.
It's going to be in slim pickings, I think.
Yeah, but you could see the difference when they took Herbig out of the lineup on the Sunday night game. That it's a pretty big drop off to, I think it's Isaiah Loudermilk, who's 300 pounds, and they're playing him out there as an edge rusher. And so 2 banged up teams. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back to talk about a fun game in the NFC, Lions-Cowboys, after this. All right, we are back on NFL Daily. And yes, if you happen to be in the UK or wherever Sky Sports NFL is aired, or wherever this game is on, I will be on the Sky Sports coverage for this next game back in the studio. Lions favored by 3 points, heading to Dallas. This is a fun one, a rematch of one of my favorite games, probably my favorite regular season game from last season. And it wasn't because of the weird, controversial ending, which was weird and fun and annoying that it was controversial. It was for the other 59 minutes of the game. This was an awesome game a year ago, Lions-Cowboys. It feels like this is mostly the same version of a Lions team, but not the same version of the Cowboys. Obviously, no Parsons for another week, no DeMarcus Lawrence. We've taken out Marshawn Nealon, who's a solid edge player for them as a rookie. They're banged up, Dallas, and they're not the same on offense either. This time it feels a little bit more of a mismatch for the Lions.
Yeah, it does on paper for sure. Logic prevailing, but we see so many teams right now that their season can roll out either way. There are so many teams clustered. And and a number of teams that people are down on. And I look at Dallas with a fair amount of upside because they're still in the mix. Look at 3 or 4 things. You mentioned DeMarcus Lawrence and Parsons out. They still win a tight game without him. Their ground game at the moment is non-existent. Zeke's done 30 carries for 98 yards. Dalvin Cook, they're talking about maybe re-upping off the practice squad.
Maybe found something last week, I thought, with the Steelers. It seemed like they went away from some of the zone stuff they were doing and just did what had worked for them better. Like their offensive line it worked a little better for 1 week, so that gave them some hope.
Moving the right way. They're clearly in the market for a receiver. They worked out Denzel Mims this week, Dante Pettis as well. And they might be in the that'll change it. But they might be in the mix for the Devontae sweepstakes. My point is, with all of this, they lead the league in penalties. That should statistically correct itself. They're not in good shape, yet they're still in contention. So the upside for Dallas is they get 2 or 3 of those things right, or at least tangibly uplift in a division that is quite dysfunctional, Washington notwithstanding, and they could be in the mix.
I don't see it personally. The run defense is so bad, and I know they've slightly course-corrected it slightly over the last couple of weeks when you go through some of the numbers, but it just structurally is so off, and they don't have the talent either, I think, for this to sustain over the course of the season. You're facing a team here where they will gladly say, let's run the ball 18 of the first 18 plays if it's cooking for us. So I think this has the potential to be a real ugly first half for Dallas. And I still watch, and I don't know what you think, Greg, but I still watch the Dallas offense, and they were driving the ball pretty comfortably against the Steelers, and Mike Tomlin was saying just how well Dak Prescott played. I still watch it, and it always looks more difficult than it should be for them. Everything just feels like a beat off. Given some of the talent they have, how good Dak is, Dak doesn't move and create much anymore. He certainly doesn't scramble anymore. Everything just feels like they've turned on a degree of difficulty setting that is completely unnecessary, and they could actually be more productive. So when you can't stop the run and it feels like hard work to generate offense, then I just don't think it's going to right itself.
Right, in this matchup where it's the best running game in the league or one of the best running games in the league, and I saw the Lions practice report and like everyone practiced. And now you just don't see that in week 6. Now they're coming off of a bye, and so that's what you want. And yes, they have a couple guys on IR, but for the most part they're extremely healthy, especially on offense, and you can just think they are going to mash. Like this Mike Zimmer defense he doesn't have the players to run the defense that he wants, and it seems like he's putting it on difficult mode for his players, and maybe they don't understand everything. And then I hate to be too basic about it, but I totally agree on the McCarthy thing. It's one where you watch the film and it really backs up those numbers with average separation and everything with Dak Prescott throwing into tight windows. And it's very 2018, 2017 Packers, where everyone was saying the same things. It's like they just are trying to rely on their players to win, and they're not winning enough. But the difference is those Packers at least had Devontae Adams, and yes, you have CeeDee Lamb here, but the depth of the players.
Sure.
Jalen Tolbert is now your number 2. He's coming off like a decent game, but it's...
So I'm talking about upside. The downside, though, the schedule is brutal. I mean, that is brutal. Look at that run.
That win last week was huge, though. To your point, if I was going to be optimistic, I never rule out teams that like have a quarterback and have a decent amount of talent, because so often teams in December just have no resemblance of what they are in October. So is there a world where they scrape out enough wins in the meantime? I think that Steelers win was one of them, where you're just hanging around 500 and things can somehow click in a different way in December when Lawrence and Parsons and Dak, you do have Dak Prescott as your... I think it's possible.
With that narrative,
it's not likely,
the
but
top
it's
of that pyramid right now, at this stage of the proceedings, is the Chiefs, right? I mean, this is exactly what we're saying. The defense is driving, the offense is going
they looked awesome
gear.
on Monday night.
Okay, right. But for the majority of the season, oh my God, they're still unbeaten and they're not playing very well. So you think about this. So it's relative upside here I'm talking about, but there are a cluster of teams that are going to be winning despite not playing particularly well, but despite that, they're still in the mix.
Yeah, but it's one of those ones where, what are we judging the standard by? To me, they came into the season with championship expectations.
Yes.
This is the year. And I'm not saying they won't make the playoffs. I'm just saying there is nothing in what they're doing right now that will go toe-to-toe with a championship caliber defense, which is what they need to be. They need to be offensively such a juggernaut to cover up the fact that they cannot stop anything on the ground defensively, and they're just so far away from it. And I understand what you're saying. You can usually figure things out, patch things up through the season, right? I think Zimmer will figure some things out. We know that McCarthy and Schottenheimer, they're not changing the offense offense in the middle of the season.
Right.
That's just not going to happen.
I think windows are sometimes overrated, but I do think there are moments when you have a better chance to advance far in the playoffs. The Cowboys had a chance. If you spun the dial a few different times last year in last year's NFC playoffs, I think they had a chance. I think this is not going to be as good as last year's teams, and I think the Lions are right in the middle of their window. And I will be curious to see if Tyler Guyton starts in this game. He's a little banged up. When he left that game, their offensive line maybe made a little sense, where that was actually their best five out there. Tyler Smith at left tackle. I forget who was it at left guard, but he's played at Tyler Bass, who's out there. And they actually looked quite good, I thought, against Pittsburgh up front in that game. All right, let's go to the Bengals. This is a Sunday night football game, 3.5-point favorites at the Giants. Yes, we're saving the Tottenham game for a little bit of a meteor talk a little later in the show. So this is the Mike Tirico game. There were some rumors out there that they were trying to get out of this game a couple of weeks ago because they were afraid of the Giants.
Sure.
Now it was like almost they needed to be more afraid of the Bengals, although I'm sure they're fine having Joe Burrow in primetime. The Giants are frisky. It is all about expectations, where they just feel like an average football team, and that feels enough above expectations that it's like, okay, you don't feel too bad about them. I heard they were blocked, though, by the Washington. They wanted to take Washington-Baltimore, and CBS has that game, and they blocked them, and so they're stuck with this Giants Bengals game. Giants really need to. They don't really need to win as much at 2-3, but the Bengals really need to win at 1-4. Like, the Bengals offense has been pretty awesome the last few weeks. Like, how do you see them looking against a relatively frisky Giants defense, Ollie?
Yeah, I think the front in particular, after a really disappointing couple in opening weeks of the season, the three star pass rushers, I guess, plus they've rolled through some guys on the interior, have finally come alive. They just ragdolled the Seahawks up front last week. Kayvon Thibodeau is alive and well, and power rushing and being very
out
impressive.
this week, though. Suddenly,
is he really?
He is week to week with a wrist injury that kind of came out of nowhere, though. But you're right, to have three players up front who are legitimate problems. Now it's two. That's a good matchup against a good Bengals O-line.
Yeah, and Lawrence has just been breaking games apart all on his own. And if you get that kind of internal pressure, Burrow is a guy who, and I know it's a cliche when you go back to Brady and what have you, everyone struggles with internal pressure. Burrow particularly is susceptible to internal pressure because he just doesn't like to bail. He wants to climb up and move through the pressure. And so if it's in his lap, Lawrence can just end this game for everyone. I think it's going to be really close because Daboll is such an excellent one week-to-week game planner facing a defensive front that is just like an absolute travesty at the moment, that I think the Giants will be able to hit some deep shots and have some pop plays, and I think they'll hang around.
Yeah, 31st in points allowed, and this is, the Lou Anarumo is one of the most highly regarded coordinators of the last 5 years, right? And that's what's faintly tragic about this Bengals side, because they are exhilarating to watch. They're entertaining because they're racking them up, and the defense, and he's managed to build a D consistently without massive names like Dallas have had. He's built this powerful D over the years, which the alchemy is not working anymore. And it got me thinking about Burrow and everything with this situation. We're talking about contenders, the Bengals in the mix or not. And you're right, if they drop this, they're in trouble. If they win this, they got the Browns next, they're suddenly right back in it. Is Joe Burrow, is he the John Elway of his generation? Is Joe Burrow John Elway? Is he going to be this sensational player that rolls and rolls, falls short in terms of championships, and then has that last hurrah?
I mean, I think he is right saying that with him as a quarterback, you're going to have a chance to win every year. You assume they're going to get that Jamar Chase contract right. You do worry about ownership, that when they were in that game against the Rams, it is tough to get back to that point where they had a lot of talent on that team. Is ownership and the player acquisition going to be as strong? I think Duke Tubman's done a good job, but you can see what happens. They're 1-4 in a season they expected to, contend. They've been pretty good, statistically against pressure. Daniel Jones is clearly not, but the Bengals have had no pass rush.
No.
The worst team in the league in terms of pass rush, which is crazy because you have Trey Hendrickson, and this Giants offensive line has helped to support my most medium take that I've had forever, which is if Daniel Jones is protected, he's fine. He's not going to be a hero, but he's fine. He'll he'll be like right there at the Andy Dalton line of the Dalton scale, where he's like a league average, and he's played fine the last couple weeks. And Ollie, he's firing up his team, trucking defenders. I mean, he's looking for contact in the running game, which does not seem like it's a good idea, but he was pretty effective. He's getting Theo Johnson involved, his rookie tight end. Like, I could see them putting up a lot of points in this game, and like Bengals are probably marking this as a win, and it seems like it's a dangerous game.
Yeah.
I think it's a close game.
I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be an upset alert type situation. The Bengals defensively, it's just declined so rapidly. You mentioned that, and what's weird is you mentioned like people take shots at Mike Brown. I totally understand it. They don't invest a ton. Well, they don't invest in scouts, but they actually draft pretty well every single season. I understand the contractual situation, but the big flaw this season has been defensive line injured and lacking talent, linebackers aging and not playing very well. Safety's looking pretty cooked. Von Bell in particular is like it's actually sad to watch him play at this point. But they've invested so much in that defensive line. You go by cap figure, you go by draft picks. The last 4 years they've put everything into it, and it's comfortably the worst in the league. It's not even like close where it is compared to everyone else. So to put that level of resources into it and to have declined so starkly is really jarring.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dable. Like, he was in his bag last week. He's starting to feel confident. He has enough people around him, and this offensive line has been good, certainly good enough, maybe even more. They can have a running game with Tyrone Tracy. Showed up last week. Chase Brown's look good on the other side. We got to move on, though. Let's go to...
Oh, okay. Can I have a quick line on Daniel Jones? Because I want to talk... Just one of my best mates is a Giants fan, and it's this perennial nightmare he's in, that Daniel Jones starts to play after a difficult patch, and this is finally the end of the road, starts to play well, hence the contract he's got, of course, starts to play well, and then it's going to be saddled with him forever and ever, all eternity.
No, I've heard that from, like Danny Heifetz said that on NFL Daily too. Is like, are we getting back into this question? No, I thought we've settled that question. But what you want is to him play at a reasonable enough level this year that he can get a fine contract elsewhere next year. You can be happy for him, and that you can just watch more entertaining football. Life is short. You'd rather win these games and have some meaningful mid-December games. I think they're trending that way, where they're going to like win 8 games, which is it's not that exciting. But
is he the Kirk Cousins of his generation?
No,
Daniel Jones. He's getting big deals.
He could be the Jacoby Brissett. I don't know. Like, just
Jacoby's a good
bounce around, be in the league. Like, be a guy that you're fine starting. Teddy Bridgewater, that was all I would. That is my medium take. People acting like that he's like the worst player in the league, but he needs protection. All right, let's go to Bucs Saints. Very excited that Spencer Rattler is getting his first NFL start. The Bucs are favored by 3.5 in this game. Look, there are a significant portion of the Saints fan base that are actually excited to see Spencer Rattler, that it's Rattler time. The agenda has been out there. Most years, this would be a difficult spot going up against a Todd Bowles defense. They've been, they'll throw a lot at you, and the offensive line for the Saints has come back to earth after...
That's a very kind way of putting it.
A great start. What did you think, Ollie, of Spencer Rattler as a prospect, and do you think this Saints offense could do enough positive things around him that actually he'd put in a fun performance? I
think he can certainly put in a fun performance. He, to me, is going to be a red zone darling. This could be like Levis type stuff where we get these really crazy wild plays, then we get the boneheaded turnovers. I fell into the camp of my mid-round quarterback love was Spencer Rattler, and I watched all the games at South Carolina, and I know how bad a lot of it was, but when you just break him down, he's got the arm talent, he's intelligent, he can move and make plays with his feet, so he just strikes me as one of these guys who's going to wind up having like a 6, 7, 8 year career where he just winds up being in different spots, and he can move the ball. I'm excited to watch him in the first game. You mentioned Todd Bowles. Bowles has been blitzing a ton, and blitzing in a way that almost no one is in the league right now. He's got his kind of own thing going on compared to the rest of the league. And most of it is to take away really short, quick outlet things. It's we mentioned in terms of old school offenses, the way Bowles is attacking people right now is going right back to what he did with Rex Ryan. And it's a very old school style of blitzing compared to when you look at the other people up there, Vance Joseph, Brian Flores. They are doing something brand new and different to what anyone else is doing. So it's a concerning matchup for me because I think the line is actually not that good. They got away with it in the first couple of weeks of the season. McCoy goes down, they get injuries on the right side, and you would just say typically to your young quarterback, right, if you see the heat, just get it out, we replace the blitz so we keep the game moving. the way Bowles is attacking people is built to make you hold on to the ball, and I think Spencer Rattler has a chance to be a developmental guy, but him holding on to the ball in his first start makes me a little bit queasy.
It always is on my radar, the extra rest, when you're the Monday night team on a short week playing the Thursday night team on a particularly long week. It was why I was on the Giants last week against the Seahawks. I don't know, maybe that's overthinking it, but that seems like a significant difference, having 5 days extra rest. And yeah, with a rookie quarterback, they have weapons on offense for Rattler to play with. But on the flip side, like, that's the matchup where you're expecting the Saints defense to carry them. They've been okay. Like, they've been fine. You've got Lattimore matching up against Mike Evans. That's been a matchup that's included more routes like cornerback on wide receiver than any cornerback on any wide receiver. Like, statistically, it's a fact according to Next Gen Stats since 2017 or whatever. So that's fun. But it's actually one of those years. I think the Bucs offense matches up fine with them. The Bucs offense has been pretty good all year. Like, they feel pretty comfortable. The running game certainly has had ups and downs, but getting better. But as a passing attack, I think they're getting the best out of Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, on that, so two things. Firstly, just jumping back, Red Zone Darlings is the perfect name for a band. In fact, I'm going to form a band after this show and do that. Yeah, Liam Cohen from the McVay tree, right? And it's fascinating watching the Baker evolution. In simple terms, he's just become more controlled. Everything is a bit calmer, right? And because Baker always histrionics, which I love, and the headbutting and all the animation. As a player this year, as a quarterback, they've adapted and he's adapted, and it's really, really clinical at times, which is surprising. I think when you think about Baker Mayfield led offense, 2.43 seconds. That's the quickest of his career in terms of release. He's got a career low 7.2% of throws 20 yards or more downfield. This is an all-new Baker. It's working right now.
Yeah, it's been quite surprising to see Baker. Like, he was good in that Atlanta game too. They're really getting him out of his worst instincts, because one of his worst traits is he takes a ton of sacks. And that's still the case. He still takes a ton of sacks, like, in terms of the amount of pressure that gets on him. But the pressure never gets there because he's throwing to his first read so often that you kind of never get to that bad Baker. I do think he's gotten away with, like, getting into scramble mode. It's worked at a higher rate than you probably would have. It's still not working all the time, but, like, he has escaped pressure a decent amount this year on scrambles at least. Like, how have you thought the Liam Cohen experiment was going to be? Because I was skeptical coming in. He felt like a little, like, one rung above Alex Van Pelt of, like, the Shanahan tree leftovers.
Don't do that to Liam.
The tree is picked over. They're like, let's take that branch. Let's take, like, who's left? Oh, it's Cohen over there at Kentucky. But you're putting him well ahead of
outrageously
Alex Van
rude.
Pelt.
Outrageously rude. He did really cool things at Kentucky. I think, I go back and forth with you on, like, the use of motion. How people just put the motion charts up, and if you run motion, you must be a really innovative mind. Cohen, to me, through the first stretch of the season, has been the best coach in the league at having a purpose to the motion. The way he's able to move and manipulate the defense to create voids is why Baker's just gunning, why he cannot come out so quickly. He will use formation and motion to manipulate one-on-ones for Mike Evans, which is not an easy thing to do. I thought in the offseason it was an upgrade going from Canales to Liam Cohen. I thought they got the best part of that deal of Canales moving on. And I think through the first few weeks of the season, they've got serious issues in the run game that I just don't know how they can quite address as we head towards the middle of the year. But to me, it's been an improvement in the passing game in the way that he's maximized everyone, most notably Baker.
I am curious also in this game, can the Saints running game get back? I mean, normally you think of the Buccaneers as like a great run defense. They haven't been statistically this year at all. They are getting healthier. They had a lot of injuries. Kalijah Cansey, I believe, is back at practice. They've been banged up, and I just feel like this Saints team is not going to work unless they can get the most out of Kamara and the most out of that zone running scheme, which, like, they had something special for a couple weeks, and then everyone was like, this is how we're going to stop it. It does not seem like they have a counter right now. I like the Bucs in this game. Let's go to Packers and the Cardinals. And yes, it is time for the game of the week, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. The Packers are 5-point favorites in this game. This is the Kevin Kugler, Darryl Johnston game. I just kind of think of this Packers run game and how they're throwing so much at opposing defenses, and it's just been a great kind of backstop for any other issues that this team has had. And I'm still waiting for a normal game out of Jordan Love. Like, everything is just boom or bust, or just like a little crazy out of him. They have that running game, which is so creative and so explosive, and there's not a lot of reason to think the Cardinals' defense is going to be able to stop it.
And that's the thing. They brought in Jonathan Gannon to uplift the D, right? It isn't working so far. Statistically, in most categories, they're the wrong end of proceedings there. I guess the hold against the Niners might act as a kind of catalyst, galvanize a little bit. Darius Robertson, their first rounder in training, he could be back soon. That'll be a big lift as well. But yeah, right now, when you think about the Packers O-line is strong. I mean, this one to me feels Packers all the way.
Yeah, I feel bad for Gannon. I mean, he's been dealt a pretty rough card. He's got the youngest defense by far in the NFL. They don't seem to have that much talent. They certainly don't have that much talent. It's clearly the weakest group of pass rushers in the league, and he's not running anything close to what he ran in Philadelphia, which was built around a 4-man rotation of pass rushers. You get 8 guys, and you just cycle through every other down who you want in there. That's going to take a couple of years to develop. I actually think they're way further along in their process than I thought they would be. They are competitive every single week. They create upsets with a defense that is lacking a bunch of talent. So, but in this game in particular, I thought it was funny you mentioned with Jordan Love. It's not even to me boom or bust. It's like everything all the time. It's
just that's what I mean. That's sort of what I'm getting at. Like, can we get like one normal
drive? One drive of normalcy would be nice.
It's everything. It's reminding me of how he used to play in the preseason, which when he wasn't the starter, and so you would watch those games closely, and it'd just be like, it'd just be like an explosion, and it is fun, but it like seems a little out of control.
Yeah, it really smacks of when he came back and he was wearing the Favre jersey. Like, he spent the time where he just grinding through Favre film, was like, this is the cool way to play football. It's like, it definitely is Jordan. I love it, but it's not going to help the team win games consistently. He seems like he's having the most fun. So
he's good at avoiding sacks. You mentioned this is not a good pass rush, and so that's a mismatch where he'll have time. So it should be a fun matchup. They're probably getting Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs back. Right. Watson was back at practice. Dobbs is apparently over being upset that, like, Tucker Kraft was getting featured in the game plan last week, or Dontavian Wicks was. I don't know what he was.
I'm fine. I'm ready to go.
Upset about, but they calmed that down. I mean, he might have had a point. Wicks didn't really come through in a big spot for all his fantasy owners out there. Fun game though. Like, even then, like, 5 points at this point feels like a lot to give. Like, Kyler.
I think Kyler's going to dice through that defense pretty effectively. They have no pass rush. They only get a pass rush when they send 5. They're the best in the league when they send 6. No one sends 6 very often. And Kyler's been in his bag this season, just gobbling up pressure. So I think Kyler's got a real chance.
Is Jai Alexander fit?
I think he was at practice. We don't know for sure, but that would be an interesting matchup. Him and Marvin Harrison.
Jr.,
He has tended to travel a little bit with better receivers. Yeah. Harrison's been quite inefficient with the targets that go to him.
He'll be fine, though. There was a crazy
He'll be fine, but it just, this year they're not like, it's just like a lot of hope balls. They've been pretty efficient offensively when they're not throwing to him, actually.
Yeah, his gravitational pull has actually been the most valuable thing he's brought to the team, essentially. And it's weird because they don't have chemistry yet within the flow of the offense. They're doing a lot of back shoulder stuff and they're just off. The timing's not great. Where they've been at their best is when they just both try and figure it out on the fly. Remember the Rams touchdown, the big boot and the turn up the sideline? That was completely like aborting what the play was supposed to be. They just figured it out together. Yeah. So they're actually better when he's not the primary, and then if it's not there, they can go and kind of do stuff on their own.
And Kyler always seems to be reacting to what happened the previous week. Like, if he just goes bananas on the Rams, like, then he just started playing freestyle like crazy the next week, and that didn't really work. And then he didn't run at all one week, and everyone's like, you should run more. And then he ran all over the 49ers last week and played really well. So they're a better offense when he does run the ball. That'll be fun to watch. Let's take one more break. We'll be back to run through the rest of the big point spread games and then wrap up with our Tottenham Hotspur matchup. Jaguars, Bears, talk a little Caleb Williams to finish out. All right, back on NFL Daily. Yes, we're at the Greenwood Sports Pub. Very cool. We just walk in here. You see it like right across from the tube. I walked all the way here from the hotel, actually.
Oh, it's a good walk. It's a nice
It's like 2.5 miles, but I'm not going to get any exercise this
First
week.
you're raw dogging, now you're...
that would be it. Yeah. And, listen to some music. That's my happy place. Like, see the bookshops. I love it. But you're getting close, and you see, like, the Bears graphics and everything as you come up. Our friend Henry Hodgson told me last week, like, the official sports pubs were literally running out of beer, like, mid-Friday. They have reservations throughout the weekend. It is sold out the whole weekend here. We have to get out of here, actually. Not fairly soon, but we'll be good because they have reservations, and it's, like, all booked up later. So it's very cool to be in London and see that sort of representation.
And this pub was, so last week, don't tell anybody this, right? But this was the Vikings headquarters last week. It was a 3-game stand in London. So the Vikings took over the pub last week, everything. So they've turned it around pretty quickly. It's kind of like, MetLife, from a Jets game to a Giants game within a week. But we did a great night with Chris Carter, the legend, Jake Reed as well. We went to all of 3 deep. Randy Moss didn't travel. So it was Chris Carter and Jake Reed. What a character Chris Carter is. What a night that was. That was a lot of fun.
He is not afraid to speak his mind.
He definitely wasn't.
Possibly lost him some jobs in the league and at ESPN, but it's fun to listen to. All right, let's roll through these big points break games, and then we'll talk the Tottenham game. Falcons -6 at Carolina, kind of the Dalton bump. Hit a little bit of a standstill last week when he had to play like a better defense, but now he's up against like a not so great defense.
So I got a London edge to this one, right? So this is Dalton. If you remember Dalton Cousins back in 2017, I want to say, probably one of the best games in London ever, the tied game, the Washington-Cincinnati game, tied game,
right, yes.
Which I did. Annoyingly, I wasn't at the game. I was in a BBC studio up north near Manchester, where the BBC Sport have their base, with OCU Manura, of course, stalwart of both the game and broadcasting.
You're also
now.
the host on BBC, which is kind of a big deal.
Back in the day, and Mike Carlson, who your British listeners will know, a legend of the game over here, long-time partner in crime, who dressed unusually for him, super sharp suit and glasses. And when I posted something out on social media saying we're ready to do the game, everyone thought it was Bill Gates. The studio was being OC, and I played along with that for a while. Anyway, that was the game we did, and I think it was probably, Ollie, I don't know if you agree, one of the best London games ever. It was an absolute thriller.
And they're not that different now, Kirk and are they? They're not that different.
No, not that different. This game, to me, has a chance, I think, to be the scoring game of the week. When you look at them, I know that the Panthers have got the issues up front, offensive line injuries, center, right guard, but neither team can rush the passer. They're the 2 worst teams in the league by pressure rate, whether they send pressure, whether they don't. They just don't get after anyone. So this has a chance, I think, to be a real fun back and forth, drive after drive after drive type game.
I liked how much Kirk was trusting it. This was something I wrote down. I wanted to ask you, Ollie, about his numbers this year when he's not pressured are insanely good. When he is pressured, they're insanely bad. Everyone was like, this isn't going to last. You're going to have to start having him move, do some play action. Actually, whenever they've done that, it hasn't really worked. They didn't really do it in that Thursday night game. He's just sitting back there and having confidence his guys are going to be where they need to be. And they've shown that one thing they've proven is they have enough offensive depth in terms of their weapons. Like, Darnell Mooney is helping out. Like, they can get other guys involved. But do you think that can work long term? That he is kind of just sitting back there as a statue and throwing the ball beautifully. Very similar to Aaron Rodgers in a way that when he has time, it's like people forget he is a beautiful thrower of the football.
Yeah,
and your lookalike.
And my lookalike. That's why I defend him all the time. An A++ anticipation thrower. The anticipation throws of the day was absurd. The throw to Darnell Mooney for the touchdown, I don't want to bore your listeners too much, that throw never happens. It's not designed to ever happen that way. That route is a clear-out route to push the coverage back and you rip it underneath. You maybe throw it as a now alert based on the coverage. He threaded it between 3 players to the point where I'm not even sure if he actually intended to throw that ball. Mooney goes up and gets it. The thing that I think is the concern is him playing that spread out 45 dropbacks a game. He's had multiple drop picks already this season. I just don't think that you can live that way with Kirk Cousins. I think if he's in the 30 dropback range, I don't think they necessarily need all the play action stuff you mentioned, but they definitely need some kind of complement with the run game or get more of a screen game involved to be able to do it effectively.
Yeah, they're doing all this outside zone in the running game, and it's not really working with Bijan Robinson. You hope they can kind of figure that out because they're really not. It's funny, they're not accentuating him just as much or worse than Arthur Smith did. They are using Drake London in a positive way. He's playing a lot out of the slot. They're targeting him a ton. When he's in the slot, they are throwing the ball to him. And you mentioned the Panthers' offensive line. Yeah, Taylor Moton, who's their best offensive lineman, is out of this game. He had one of those crazy snap streaks going. He hadn't missed a game for 120 straight games, so they lost their center, and Moton will be back pretty soon, it sounds like, but he's out this week, and Corbett, their center, is also out for the week. So this week, I think it can work for Kirk to just rip it because he's not going to face any pressure. Long term, we'll see. Washington at Baltimore. The Ravens are somehow favored by 6.5 in this game. That's like a number where they're begging everyone to take Washington because they think actually this will be on some level, the numbers say it might be a little bit of a comeback to earth game for Washington. Like Jaden Daniels just had like a normal game last week, and that was fine. Like they still were outstanding. So it shows that they're more on offense. I actually wanted to talk Ravens offense for a bit. Their offense has been a lot better than people expected. Like they were a great offense last year.
Sure.
They're the number one running game by EPA, by DVOA, by like orders of magnitude, but they're actually the number one passing game too by DVOA. So extremely efficient. You see the receivers very open for Lamar Jackson. He's making good decisions, so it's a plus matchup against this Washington Commanders secondary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the cliched book on Lamar is, well, does he have the arm of those top tier players? And it's not a nonsense, I think, and it's been proved to be that this season. 211 yards a game is what they're averaging on the ground, which means they keep up this clip. They're on pace to beat their own record this season. But this is a decent run D against the Washington have they're going up against. So that is going to be fascinating. Just on this game, the other thought of mine, given rehabilitation story seems to be one of the big narratives of the season, Sam Darnold, I guess, being the number one rehabilitation story so far, I think Cliff Kingsbury's got to be a close second, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Kingsbury has reinvented his reputation in the space of about 6 weeks.
Right. What have you thought about what they've done with their running game? These are maybe the two best running games in the league in terms of just like been cool to watch.
Yeah, and the offensive line for Washington has gone so under the radar. They've played unbelievable. Centers, Biadasz has been by far playing his best football. Cosme at right guard has been really good. They re-signed him before the season. It's kind of one of those funky contracts. Like, is he really that kind of player? Evidently, he is. Cliff's, I mean, we've been here with Cliff before where, he kind of like throws it out early in the season. You get to week 6, week 7, it comes crashing down. He kind of got all the fun stuff out the way. What's different this year is he's just completely redefined his run game. It is almost identical to what Harbaugh was doing with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick back in San Francisco. He has just clearly gone and studied that stuff, a lot of the Greg Roman stuff, and then just transported it over. They move more than everyone, right? They're pulling and wrapping people all the time. It is the most diverse run game by a good amount, and this is a first real test for that offensive line who've been so good. The Browns was a first initial test. They handled Myles Garrett so well. This is the first time they're facing a front where 5, 6, 7 positions are really good. So it's a big test.
Right. Can they go a little pass first? Because that's how you attack the Ravens. They're so stout up front. Or do you stick with what's kind of gotten you here? Look, if the Ravens want to get in man coverage, and they're relatively high in man coverage, Jaden has just been the best scrambler in the league. Again, Lamar's the best just pure runner, but if you look at QBR rushing value this year, Jaden Daniels is actually number 1 in the league because he's just killing you with 11-yard runs on 3rd and 9 whenever they play man coverage.
Yeah, and they're doing something really interesting in the blitz game. They are crushing the blitz because they are cool leaving unblocked runners in a way that you don't ordinarily do in the NFL. You never in the NFL allow a free runner through the middle of the line of scrimmage. That's just not allowed. You allow a free runner at the perimeter because the quarterback can see it, can throw behind it. They have freed up to say Jaden can beat people, and we saw it against the Browns, right?
Crazy.
2 times. And now you don't expect him to make 3 people miss like that, but they have changed some of their rules in a way that defenses don't actually know now how to approach this stuff. So what Cliff Kingsbury has done, obviously Daniels has been incredible. The whole machine is just clicking so well.
I mean, if you're a running game dork, this is the game. Washington. Yeah. They remind me of they were running some they looked like the Hogs out there last week with the way they're pulling their guards and stuff and just powerful. But then there's Baltimore, which on their option plays, both options are so good. And I don't just mean obviously Lamar and Derrick Henry are both so good. I mean when you watch the playback, a lot of times it feels like, actually, Lamar, you should have kept it. The right read was to keep it. You would have had a big run, but he's handing it off, and Derrick Henry's getting a big run anyways for 7 yards. So it's really cool. I did want to mention Dean Pease is in the building. You talked about reclamation projects and nice stories. Dean Pease is back. They brought him out of retirement. Nice. They've been kind of struggling defensively, and he's a consultant there with Zach Orr.
I love that, because talking to Washington, I like the Rivera Del Rio tandem, because it was kind of getting close to one of my dreams, as you well know, Greg. We talked about it on the show in the past, is having, if I ever get to become an NFL GM, having a coaching staff that is septuagenarian as a minimum, 70 plus.
Pease would be a good choice for it.
Pease would be in there.
He would great. He probably coached Zach Orr, who's now the coordinator back in Baltimore, when Zach Orr was like 22 years old. I mean, Zach Orr might be the youngest coordinator in the league. So that's good. A little Dean Pease coming back in the league. Houston, -7 at the Patriots. I like the Patriots covering this. That's a lot for me, and I've been pretty down. The Patriots had their safety, Jabril Peppers, put on the commissioner's exempt list after a very troubling arrest last week. Of course, it's Drake May's first game, and it's a tough matchup for his first game.
Yeah, it's not one that you would... and it's an interesting one. I understand the debate, and I'm sure you've spoken about whether they should start and whether you don't. And it does feel almost like I can't afford to lose the building decision, rather than this is exactly what the plan is. And I get he gives him the best chance to win right now because he can move and he's got a stronger arm and he's just a more talented player than Jacoby Brissett. But I do think throwing him to the Wolves like this in his first game is a real tough one. And even if he plays well and they sneak the win out, I think there's going to be some pretty brutal moments.
I've been through this argument, so I won't repeat it, but it's going to be hard. Playing in the NFL is hard. This game will be harder than the next handful, which look easier on paper, but you're going to have really hard games. Jacoby Brissett wasn't playing well. I'm more like the Gerard Mayo thing that concerned me the most this week was him saying we played well enough defensively and on special teams against the Dolphins, and that he was upset that the news leaked on Tuesday when he hadn't told the team yet. So it just speaks to an organization where things aren't being run that well. You gave up almost 200 yards on the ground to the Dolphins. Yeah. You gave up scores every single possession in the second half of that game to a Dolphins offense that had been the absolute worst in the league. So I think should be much more disappointed with how his defense is. And yes, they've had a ton of injuries, but they've also had some easy matchups, and they have not looked good in any way.
The offensive line, 21 pressures on 39 pass plays against Miami. Will Anderson's coming to town. It is negligent, is what it is, starting Drake May in this game.
I think it's
not fine. It's relative.
I would be with you.
They're like playing Layden Robinson, who didn't play at all in training camp, and they just put him out there week one to go up against hey, just go block Quinnen Williams. It's like
I know,
what happens.
That is certainly what happens.
I gotta stop making this point.
Drake May is like the future of the organization, and this guy's career, Gerard Mayo, is tied to this quarterback. Is different than the right guard, who's a rookie, who's played a bunch of football already. I am concerned.
I'm contradicting my argument earlier about the Joe Flacco argument, right? But this is the exception to that rule.
I just want to see him make enough plays. This week probably is not going to go that well. Who knows? Maybe they'll hold down the Texans. The Texans put Nico Collins on injured reserve since we last did a podcast, but we did know he was going to be out for a little while. That's concerning. Their offensive line has not been playing that well. I think C.J. Stroud has really made up for some deficiencies in terms of schematically and the running game and everything. He's just awesome, and he's probably going to continue to be awesome, but I don't think they're putting him in the best position to
No, certainly not. I mean, they have so many penalties. They can't even line up at this point. He's got plays this season where he's holding the back of a guard to hold the pressure off from him while someone is holding onto a towel and the undershirt coming off him, and he's still completing 15 yards throws down the field. The one thing about C.J. Stroud that marks him out from any of the other young guys we have in the league is he does not take bad sacks. Even when they take sacks, they are sacks that are acceptable within what would be the coaching world of, okay, you take one on a third and must have it. It is what it is. We'll move on. He never ever takes bad sacks. The Patriots don't even get after anyone. They got one of the worst pass rushers in the league.
All right, maybe the 7 points is plenty. I just thought it's just Texans coming off a couple big wins at home. They snuck out a win against Jacksonville. They're coming. It just feels like a letdown game where maybe it's a young team that relatively take. That it's just like a close, ugly game. But I'm a Drake May believer. All right, Eagles hosting the Browns. The Eagles are favored by 9 points in the year 2024, which is crazy to me. The Eagles have not played well this year overall. They're very lucky to be 2-2,
but they're healthy.
They are healthier. They get A.J. Brown back. They get Lane Johnson back. They're probably getting Devontae Smith back. He is in the protocol but practicing, which is usually a good sign that you'll be cleared by the end of the week. Most importantly, they're playing the Browns. That's the reason. But still, that seems like a huge number for me. We haven't seen a lot of in-rhythm throws by Jalen Hurts. This is a team that I didn't know what to think about before the season. I still don't really know what to think about.
Yeah, the Sirianni-Jalen Hurts stuff pre-season when Jalen Hurts gave one of the most awkward answers to a reporter I think I've ever seen in answering a question about the offense, and it was quite clearly apparent they were not on the same page. So what's played out isn't wildly surprising when you look at that dysfunction they couldn't even mask there, right? But this is a decent spot, I guess, because not specifically for the offense, but conversely, against this Browns offense that is so misfiring, the golden boy of coaching in the last couple of years, Kevin Stefanski, is now appearing on Hot Take Coach on the Hot Seat list, which is
crazy because he literally just signed a contract extension.
It's crazy, and it's obviously nonsense to people getting carried away, but as has been well documented, this bound-in deal, I mean, we're talking about whether you play with the vet hand because it's going to give you a moderately better chance to win a game or put a run together versus seeing what you know with a young rookie or sophomore quarterback. The Browns are in this crazy situation where they're completely bound in. They've just got to keep on playing Watson and hope he turns a corner. I don't think he's ever going to get back to Texans Watson, but if he can uptick 15-20%, if they can protect him a little bit more, if when Nick Chubb comes back, maybe with this D, then they do become a contender. But I don't think they've got any other option. People are talking about Jameis coming in, and Jameis's cameo at the Saints a few years ago was tidy, sure, but literally, what's the point of bringing him in?
Well, bringing Jameis, I mean,
other than
trying to win some football games.
Trying to win games.
But they have to give him enough upside?
I think Deshaun Watson is bad enough that it's fair to expect Jameis Winston to play better, yes. By a significant amount.
Significant amount.
Especially in that offense where Stefanski has shown Jameis's last few appearances in New Orleans were pretty rough. But Kevin Stefanski has shown that he can make players look better than they have been in other spots. And so I would expect Jameis under Stefanski to be
That's
better.
A good point.
I think this is going to be Deshaun Watson's last start if it doesn't go well. I think they're at that point.
Yeah, I think so too, but I'm surprised it hasn't happened already to the point where it feels like because they just can't get out of the contract. So it might even be a thing from on high, like we just cannot bench this guy. What are we going to do? Just have a $92 million sinkhole on the sideline?
You know what? Who moderately enjoys this, so I'm sure he wants to win games, though, is Jim Schwartz, who's like, no one's talking about how my defense is pretty easy to run on. We're about to play the Eagles. Like, we've gone from one of the best defenses in the league to an average to below average defense. Like,
but that's defensive football. You don't have sustainability year to year unless you have magical players at all three levels. They don't. They have a really talented front. They've got some pieces in the secondary, but it's not like they're overwhelmed with talent at all.
And they got no offense, right? So
and this is a really tough match. Right. Last week they actually had a couple positive plays in series in the first half, and then eventually the dam sort of broke. But this is a terrible matchup for them because this defense is very susceptible to the run, and I think coming off this with like the Eagles, they roll. Saquon Barkley having a big game. All right, we are going to take one quick break. I'm going to say goodbye to you, Nat.
Right, I'm out of here.
You are out of here. I love you, buddy. Like, you have been a pal to me on all these trips. Everyone check out Nat's podcast, and it's been a pleasure. We'll do this again.
It's great to see you, man. Thank you very much for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Always done a lot with Ollie Connolly as well.
Yeah.
So good to see you, bro.
Okay, and we'll be back quickly right after this break. All right, back on NFL Daily, wrapping up our Week 6 preview show. It has been really fun to be here at the Greenwood Sports Pub in London. The Bears home for the week. We said goodbye to one iconic presenter in London, and we're welcoming in another. Yes, so Nat Coombs is gone. Neil Reynolds is here for Sky Sports. Neil's actually got it in his contract. Ollie Connolly is still with us. Ollie probably doesn't know this, but Neil refuses to do anything on air with Nat Coombs, so they couldn't be on the same show at the same time. They're rivals.
Although we used to be back in the day on BBC Radio.
Okay.
But yeah, I had that written in. Luckily, you found me sort of on the floor under the bar and dragged me out. So
I wish you were that way, but you're too responsible for that. We're actually doing a show for your podcast and Sky Sports later in the day. This is how big time Neil is, Ollie. I know for a fact he is at a dinner later tonight that includes Roger Goodell, and this is like a tough invite to get. I looked at the invite. I'm not going to say everyone that's on here. I'm already blowing up your spot that you're there, but it's either massive like celebrities in terms of former NFL players or people that make seven figures at the NFL.
How do I do neither of those things? What am I doing wrong?
But I saw the seating chart, and I was told I cannot talk about the seating chart on this podcast, so I won't. All right, we're gonna finish up the preview show by talking a little Jags Bears. I just felt like, all right, let's finish off the show this way. I'm excited for this one. I chose, not that I, had the pick of the litter, but I pushed to come to this week's game because I thought I can see Caleb Williams play football in person. That's something I've never done before, and I hope to do more than once. And so I'm really excited for that. Just from a bird's eye view, looking at this game, Neil, what gets you going? The Bears are favored by 2.
So I know it's so obvious, but that's where we would start as well. When you look at Trevor coming off his best game of the season for the Jags, behind a kind of healthier offensive line, using Brian Thomas and all those weapons. So it's. Most fans who go to that game on Sunday are going to pay attention to the quarterbacks. We always do. Caleb is, I can see why, and it's unfair on a young rookie. I can see why he gets the kind of Mahomes comparison sometimes. Not all the time, but there's just sometimes there'll be a play, and you're like, that looks great. I saw it in training camp. I was sat with Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated. We're watching Caleb make this incredible play, climbs the pocket, rolls to his right, throws as he's falling away to Rome Odunze from 40 yards downfield. And Albert went, you know what that looks like, don't you? I said, yeah, I saw him in Kansas City yesterday on the day before. I mean, so there's a lot to be excited about, and it starts with the quarterback.
Wait, you must have talked, not to just hold off on the game for a second, you must have talked to Caleb that day, too. What was he like as a person? Because, Neil, whenever you go on those trips, you're always sending those on Instagram, all your pictures, and you get the coach, you get the coach and the quarterback at every place. There's no way I'm getting those guys. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I spoke to Caleb in the summer. I spoke to Caleb yesterday as well. I did a sit down with him yesterday. I just thought I'd drop that in. Yeah, he's. I really like him. I think he's. I noticed from a off the field stuff first when I met him in Chicago. Very comfortable in his own skin. He's going to be who he wants to be. He's going to show his emotions. He's going to lead the way he wants to lead, and I really respect that. I think he's learning to be. He said he likes. Obviously, everyone likes the out of structure plays. What kind of gets him up in the morning is making on time throws. What he calls the kind of boring stuff, but it's what we need to see to make this offense go. He also said that after last week's game, he got home and then texted the quarterback's coach, was listed out the things he wanted to work on this week. And I kind of stopped him. I was like, you threw for over 300 yards. You won your second game in a row. Everyone was talking about how great it was. And you're sitting at home listing out what you want to work on this week. So I'm very impressed with him.
It's interesting he said that what makes him excited is the on-time throws, Ollie, because you put it really well on your podcast with John Ledyard. Again, everyone check out the Read Optional. I thought you said it in a way that maybe the first few weeks of the season, they threw a lot at him, and maybe they pared it down, and that's led to better results the last few weeks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is on the staff too. They were trying to do everything imaginable, get to the best possible play, and he was just being asked to do an awful lot. Neil mentioned it there. He's running everything at the line of scrimmage. That was not who he was projected to be coming into the league. He was never asked to do that stuff at USC. That stuff is really basic at USC. Waldron's is beyond expansive compared to the rest of the league anyway, and he's going up to the line of scrimmage with 3 or 4 plays, having to pick that apart. Right. I think that they have certainly, you can tell, pared certain things down situationally. The start of drives is the most obvious one. The first 2 plays of every drive, there is no checking anymore. It's like, let's get this guy comfortable. If he's comfortable and we can get the drive rolling, then as Neil mentioned, we can get more of the fun, creative plays. But the thing with Williams has always been that for as fun as the splashy stuff is, he was still unbelievable on time and in rhythm at USC. He just had a bad offensive line for the most part. So I think the development is going to be really interesting. This week is a really, really fun matchup, but I couldn't be more impressed, honestly. I think that people were throwing that Alexander Brown way too early on, given what was asked of him in those early weeks.
Yeah, but you would love to see, just as a fan, a few more of the big plays in the off, structure plays, because there's almost been times the last few weeks where you can almost see him thinking, like, don't leave the pocket, and it's worked in 2 pretty advantageous matchups, the Rams and then the Panthers. This is similarly advantageous against the Jaguars in the back end. I think the one chance the Jaguars have is if Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen have like a big-time game, getting pressure on them, then they have a little bit of a chance.
And that line's playing better. You look at the line the last couple of weeks, again, it's all relative against who they're playing against, but that's where the key matchup is, I think, on that pressure. If they can get to Caleb Williams, he recognises he's a rookie as well. He talked about that yesterday. He said that he's quite hard on himself and that he feels at times he maybe needs to give himself a little bit more grace, because he said, I have to remember that I am a rookie. So to your point, Ollie, about the too much on the plate, all of that stuff, I think that is a real thing. It was a real thing for him.
Yeah, I think, look, they took the opposite approach to what is happening in Washington with Jaden Daniels. We mentioned Jaden Daniels before. What is asked of Daniels is fairly simplistic. The offense has been unbelievable, and it's the best way to approach winning games. Jaden Daniels is an MVP candidate. It feels with Caleb Williams like they took the 17-game, 6-year view of let's just give him the mother load, and hopefully he figures it out by the midpoint. This is the week, I think, where we will get more of the out-of-structure stuff.
Yes.
The Jags don't blitz. They don't simulate pressure. They don't do anything. They play press coverage. They send 4 guys. It is really old-fashioned Ryle Nielsen defense. So he's no longer have to diagnose, is that guy dropping, who's rolling where, what's happening in the secondary. If someone just flashes in his face, he can just then go and do Caleb Williams things.
I hope we see that. And the Ryan Nielsen Jaguars have been underwhelming. They've had injuries certainly at linebacker and cornerback where they might have issues anyways, but it just hasn't gone well at all. So that's a good matchup. On the flip side, I do kind of think about Caleb, what he said to you about the notes coming back on Sundays night and wanting to get better and better. And we don't know what's going on in the Jaguars building. But what we haven't seen on the field from Trevor Lawrence is like a progression of here's the details that he's getting better at in his career. He always has missed more throws that are there than I liked in terms of him getting to his ceiling. This year it's been on another level where until last week it was a lot, and he's a streaky quarterback, and this is a really tough matchup for him. So I want a close game. I always, in London, am rooting for just like, let's get some points and let's have it within one score. And I'm a little worried on both ends this week. We don't know. It's only a 2-point spread here, if you want to trust that. And Lawrence is coming off his best game of the year, but I think there is a way that you could see this game being like 26-10 or something like that.
I mean, I think Trevor now, and I'm a big supporter of him, and I enjoy watching his highs, but I think you get frustrated by the lows, and they are both in equal measure. And we got a body of work now. This is year 4, and he knows that. He talked about that in the summer, that this is the best team they've ever had, and they all talked about finishing.
Wait, so you got Lawrence too?
Well,
of course you got
I
Trevor.
said he said about it. I didn't say he said it to me.
Yeah.
I'm hearing what I'm hearing.
I gotcha.
I was trying to settle that one down.
I mean, he would be an intimidating guy for you to go just interview just
Why?
because. Well, just because.
Why?
The hair,
I don't have to have hair. I don't need the hair.
Okay, that's true. You've done well. You've done well.
Oh wow, that was 8 minutes. We got to the hair.
Sorry about that.
Fine.
He just, Ollie, though, like, this year's been particularly disappointing.
What really frustrates me with him is, at this stage, I just accept we're getting 25 turnover-worthy throws a season. That's who he is. Phillip Rivers had years like that, and he was able to trim some of the fat as it went along. What is just odd about his game is he's very nuanced as a player. When you watch him mechanically, he does an awful lot of Matt Ryan-type things to maneuver and manipulate people, so that is in there. that player exists, but it's as though he gets sloppy or lazy or bored mid-game, and it's just, we're at the stage now where you just can't have that degree of variance week in, week out. You can live with a guy who makes 3 special throws a game and has 1 dud that he's going to turn over, and you just go, that's who he is, as long as he hits all the open easy ones, and he just misses too many of the open easy ones. So the trade-off becomes, we got a guy who's not keeping us on schedule all the time. We might get 2 special throws, but now we're getting 2 really rough ones every single week. It's just not a way to consistently win.
Yeah, not always seeing like the open receivers, and he's had some. Brian Thomas Jr. Like I'm excited. I'm excited to watch him in person. His progression has been great to see. More hands catches, more contested catches. Like he looks like if he's not a 1 already, he's a future 1. Tanks Bigsby and the running game has gotten going. So there is a route to them kind of catching fire in London like they did a year ago.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think last week was a fluke. I think they got healthier. I think they've still got talent there, and Thomas is so exciting. I think there's a little bit of. So when I first watched him play, I kind of just saw a few plays early on in the season. I was like, he's almost like a running back after the catch. Mm-hmm. But then I watched him no, he can fly. He's like a proper a proper speedster. I mean, he's got everything, and so he's definitely given them juice. Bigsby has been a really good kind of addition, with ETN being a bit injured and a bit banged up. Doug Peterson says that it's still ETN's job, but I think you've got to give Bigsby carries now. He's earned them. Yeah,
and their line needs to play better. Like that, I think that's been an underrated issue the last couple of years. I think they were expecting Anton Harrison, their right tackle, to play like at another level this year. That maybe hasn't happened for them. All right, that's it. We've talked this game out. Ollie Connolly, thank you for spending all this time. Ollie's going to be back on Sunday night. You're not backing out of that yet?
Not back. Not
Monday
yet.
morning.
Not yet. Yeah, I'll text
see
you.
How Sunday afternoon goes.
Midnight on Sundays.
I overstaffed that game because so we're going to be working on Sky Sports. If you happen to be in the UK, you'll be watching Neil Reynolds covering the pregame, and then during, obviously, Jaguars Bears. I'll be part of that coverage as well before the game and during the game a little bit on the sidelines, and then I'll head back. I'll be part of their coverage, and then we're going to tape an NFL Daily actually at the TalkSport studios at 1 a.m.
Wow.
And so Ollie has...
Who have you overstaffed with?
Yeah, Ollie is going to join me there, and Phoebe Schechter is going to drive with me from the Sky Studios.
Phoebe's a lunatic. She needs to learn when to sleep.
Yes, I know you won't be there at the studios with me, so I wouldn't dare ask the Rich Eisen of the UK to join me at 1 a.m.
I might be 3 glasses of red in by then.
Yes, I appreciate you coming with me here, and you're going to help me make some picks on our Friday afternoon show as well. So for Neil, for Ollie, like when we're in the Greenwood Sports Pub, you know that football is back. See you next time.